here to actually provide all the support to develop students to become a confident graduate that is needed by the industry. Please feel welcome to visit us to see how we do our transformation of students.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Breaking Stigma Towards Mental Illness, Understanding the Story Behind Them. Before we started, I would like to go over a few things so that you can know how to participate in today's webinar events. First, audience are welcome to ask any questions in the live chat rooms, and our speakers will try to respond from time to time. Secondly, we also have a Q&A sections will be also open in the last 10 minutes. The attendance and evaluation forms for the digital certificates, the link will be provided after the webinar ends. Once again, welcomes everyone to today's webinar, Breaking Stigma Towards Mental Illness, Understanding the Story Behind them. As we know that normally we will know that mental illness as a list of symptoms and complexities, but hardly do we see the people behind them. In this webinar, we will hear the experience of everyday people as they talk about their struggles and how they have coped them. We also explore the damaging effect of stigma and ways to break through them in order to support the people in our life affected by mental illness. I'm Grace, the host speaker for today's. I'm also one of the lecturers at Sagi College, and I attended my master's degree in UCSI as a child psychology. Previously, actually, I have a lot of experience working with children who have diagnosed with autism and ADHD. I would now like to introduce you our speakers for today, Dr. Aisya, who is the doctor of psychology from Malaysia. She was trained in UK and recently returns to Malaysia from working in UK's National Health Service. Dr. Aisya is very passionate about assisting people who struggle with their mental health and emotional difficulties. So strongly believe that everyone deserves a chance for their voice to be heard and find ways to cope. She also have a particular experience working with individuals who have depressions, anxiety, emotions, and trauma-related difficulties, and also psychosis. Now we are pleased to have Dr. Aisya here to share with us her experience.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well. So yes, as Grace mentioned, we will be talking about breaking stigma towards mental illness, understanding the stories behind them. So I'm going to share my slides now, if that's okay. And let me know if you can see them. Let me just, okay. All right. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just to also say that, mental health stigma is such a broad topic. And essentially, because of time constraints, of course, we can't really go in depth with this topic. However, I really hope that this will just give you a bit of a flavor on the mental health stigma as a topic. So if you have any further questions after this webinar, you can email me at aisya@resolve.my. Okay, thanks. So before we begin, I'd like to ask the audience 4 questions. Would you be comfortable having a conversation with someone who has a mental illness, such as depression or anxiety? Would you care for a family member who has a mental illness? Would you be friends with someone who has a mental illness? Would you want to be romantically involved with someone who has a mental illness? So if you had answered no to any of the questions above, ask yourselves why. And really reflect on it, like if there's a no to you feeling comfortable caring for a family member who has a mental illness, why is that? And be honest with yourself. You don't have to write it in the comments, just reflect with yourself for a bit. Okay. So now we are going to talk about mental health stigma and its consequences. So what is it? Why is it so important? And what's the effect of it? When we talk about stigma, we really talk about 2 types of stigma. The first is social stigma, and the second is internalized or self-stigma. Social stigma, in essence, is really the negative stereotypes and attitudes where we label someone out to be different. So in the case of mental illness and mental health, it would be like, for example, labeling us as normal and individuals who have mental health struggles as abnormal, for example. It could also include discriminatory language, so things like calling people who have mental illnesses as crazy or psycho, and also discriminatory behavior, excluding people from certain spaces, for example, like employment or education, purely based on that diagnosis of mental illness. And of course, all of this affects the groups or individuals that this social stigma is targeted towards. And that would lead us to the second part, internalizing stigma. It's where a person internalizes the negative stereotypes and holds them about themselves. So, for example, if the stigma is that people with mental illness is believed to be weak, then perhaps the person will internalize it and think to themselves, oh, am I weak for having mental illness? And that would lead to feelings of shame and helplessness, and this inability to talk about their mental illness to their loved ones and acquaintances. So what causes stigma, or what worsens it? To be honest, stigma or any sort of biases or beliefs that we have is shaped from our society or the community that we live in. And it often takes a long time to develop. So with mental health stigma, it's been something that's been present for decades, essentially. So there's many reasons as to why mental health stigma occurs, but I'm just going to talk about the main 3 ones. The first is the media. And if you notice that the media tend to portray mental illness in quite a negative light. I placed a picture of Joker, the movie, because I think when that movie came about, and because it was such a popular and sensationalized movie, you wouldn't believe the amount of people came out to me and asked, so do crazy people behave that way or act that way? And that really saddened me because, when I think about it, Joker is not the only movie that portrays mental illness in a negative light. There's movies like Split, which is also quite a popular movie. And even in our local media, there might be certain experiences of mental illness where it might be portrayed in a way that people don't really understand or don't really necessarily pick it up as mental illness. Like, for example, in our horror movies, they may portray symptoms of mental illness as perhaps a sign of spiritual attack or black magic, or even a weakness in their religious beliefs. And that brings on to the second part, lack of understanding due to cultural, religious, spiritual beliefs. So why is that a problem? It's a problem because, with the previous example, for example, if someone, say, was struggling with their mental illness and it was perceived to be a spiritual attack, then the individual might go to alternative treatments first before getting medical treatment or mental health treatment. That might not necessarily be a negative or a bad thing in itself, because of course it's within your right to seek alternative treatments as long as it doesn't bring harm to yourself. But it becomes a problem when that's the only form of treatment that you seek. So sometimes for individuals who have mental illness, particularly ones like psychosis, or you might know it as schizophrenia, where people might be in alternative treatments for years and years and years before we see them in mental health hospitals or treatments. And we know that from studies, the delay in treatment, the longer the delay in treatment is, the worse the symptoms is and the harder it is to treat. So that's why the lack of understanding is so damaging. Inaccurate perceptions. I think there's quite a lot of perception that mental illness is like a normal fluctuation in mood. Like, for example, saying that I'm depressed when we go through something difficult or when you watch a sad movie. Or if you happen to be a bit clean, calling yourself OCD. So, but this everyday language can allow the lay person to think, is mental illness really not that serious? And that would lead to people thinking that, oh yeah, people with mental illness are weak, or can't they just get over it? Things like that, that can be very damaging to the individual. So what are the common stigmas? Again, there's plenty of mental health stigmas and beliefs around, but I'm just going to hone in on 4 of them. I've already alluded to this before. Mental illness is caused by a personal weakness. I am weak, therefore that's why I have mental illness. Or you are weak, that's why you have mental illness. Mental illness is incurable and lifelong, believing that the person cannot change or the person cannot be elevated by their symptoms. People who have mental illnesses cannot handle work or school. And people with mental illness are dangerous and criminals. And I think that's the one that's been perpetuated by the media quite regularly. Okay, so I talked a bit about the consequences of stigma, but just to reiterate, it stops people from seeking mental health support, and it stops people from talking about their mental health. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that have, mentioned how the fear of telling their employers, for example, that they have a mental illness, in fear that they would be discriminated against or even dismissed from their jobs. It will lead to a worsening of symptoms because of that lack of help and support, and also social isolation because relationships might deteriorate as a result of having a mental illness. It could also lead to further worsening the lack of knowledge of mental illness. And it will also lead to loss of opportunities, whether it's jobs or education or even housing. And of course, it will exacerbate prejudice and discrimination. So of course, if stigma is in such a way that people are, like, say, dangerous or unstable, then of course it might lead to certain people to have such significant stigma that they start to bleed into their actions and their words. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to play this video. I hope it does work. Okay. And I hope the audio works as well. So essentially this video is about a social experiment on mental health stigma. I hope it's okay if I just open up the slides for a bit just to, okay, hold on. Wait, I think, never mind. Sorry. Okay, let me just try to play it. But essentially, as I play the video, pay attention to the pay attention to the certain mental health stigmas that they have, and really look at their facial expressions as well. So I'm going to try to play it. Let me know if the audio works. If not, I'll have my colleague to help me out in this part.
You can be born perfectly rich, have a very good lifestyle, have parents who care very well for you. I don't think mental health issues discriminate against anyone of any race, gender, or social background.
Hi, nice to meet you. Please have a seat.
My name is Nicole. I'll be your moderator for this discussion.
I'm Nicholas. Today, I'm going to ask you a few questions about mental health in Singapore. What do you know about mental illness?
I just know there's depression.
How do you say that? Bipolar disorder.
The wire short circuit, you know.
This guy's crazy, all these kind of words.
Has nothing to do with me.
Would you hire somebody with mental health condition?
I'll probably, make them work in admin side.
Simple, cleaning, or some simple job for them.
Either they hurt themselves or they're going to hurt somebody else. Then if you're mental illness, you apply for a job. But who in the right sense will really want to take you?
Would you date somebody who has a mental health condition?
Some of them will get quite manipulative. They say like, if you break up with me, I'll cut myself or I'll kill myself.
And then sometimes they tend to post unreasonable things, such as like a small thing that happened, and then they'll make a big fuss out of it.
I cannot handle. I don't know how to handle.
How would you react to, a friend or family member who's diagnosed with mental illness?
The bridging needs to be the family and not a stranger.
我们不是专业医生，我们可能处理不了。
If possible, I would just stay away as far as possible.
这个笑最好是不要靠近他。
I didn't introduce myself fully. I suffer from clinical depression.
I was clinically diagnosed with depression. I'm living in recovery.
And I overcame it. I wrote a letter that I would like you to read out to me now.
"12 years is a long time to live with a mental health condition.
In the 12 years that I've been diagnosed with depression,
This is what I've learned.
I've learned that the greatest battles we fight are the ones with ourselves.
I've learned that most conversation about employment and the moment I reveal my diagnosis. I've learned that shame is something society teaches you. I've learned how to say sorry for showing symptoms of my condition.
I've learned that friends can disappear, and I will never hear from them again.
I've learned that family doesn't always know how to support you, no matter how much you need them.
I've learned that hope is a little voice that whispers maybe.
I've learned that recovery is a process. I've learned that one small crack doesn't mean I'm broken.
I've learned that I have an illness, but this illness is not my identity.
so sorry that you're going through this.
I'm so
Do you have any questions you want to ask me?
All right, so I'm just going to double check if the audio was fine. Thank goodness there was subtitles. Let me just try to escape. Oops. Oh, okay. Right. Can't seem to make it smaller, guys. I'm really sorry about this. Oh, okay, there we go. Yes. Okay, brilliant. So everyone can hear that. Great. So yeah, so essentially, that was the video and social experiment on mental health stigma. It's quite an emotional video, and in fact, I've watched this quite a number of times, and I still feel emotional even now, like hearing about the experiences and the stigma that people have for individuals with mental illness. I think one thing as well that was pretty interesting, and I don't know whether the audience noticed this, but at the point when the interviewer said, "Hey, I've got mental illness," you could practically see the surprise in many people's faces, and you can't help but wonder, what is the image of someone who has mental illness that they have to get such a reaction that, oh, like I didn't know that having mental illness mean that you could potentially look like anyone else. Is that what they were thinking? So yeah, and also I wonder whether anyone in the audience was also shocked when the two talked about having mental health struggles as well. Oops. Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, all right. Okay, so we go on to the next part on understanding mental illness. What is mental illness? Why does it occur? And also learning about the stories and struggles of individuals who have gone through mental illness themselves. So what is mental illness? Mental illness involves changes in emotions, thinking, and our behavior, and is associated with significant distress and problems in functioning, be it social or work, and also could involve deterioration in family activities. There are more than 200 classified types of mental illness. The most common one, and the ones that I'll be talking in more detail today, are depression and anxiety. So why is it important to inform ourselves about mental illness? In essence, it's important because it's more common than we think it is. Globally, it's been estimated that 1 in 4 people in the world is affected by mental illness at some point in their lives. A national survey in Malaysia that was conducted in 2015 said that every 1 in 3 adults aged 16 years and above in Malaysia suffer from some form of mental health difficulties. And they also estimated by this year, mental illness is expected to be the second biggest health problem affecting Malaysians after heart disease. So let's understand the facts behind the myths or the stigma that I talked about before. Mental illness is not the fault of the person. No one chooses to have a mental illness. It is a result of complex biopsychosocial factors, of which I will discuss in more details at a later part of the slides. But basically, biopsychosocial factors is to do with the interaction with the environment. So things like what happened in your life versus, and also biological things like genetics, for example. Mental illness is not always lifelong. As I said before, the faster you get treatment, the more likely and the faster the recovery. And some individuals with depression and anxiety only requires to take medication and therapy for a short period of time. People with mental health conditions have jobs, go to school, and are active members of their communities. So I'm not going to go through this website, but I'm sure you'll be getting the slides after this talk. But it would be good if you could take a look at this link, and it really goes through the historical geniuses and their possible mental health conditions. I think one of the person that they talk about was Abraham Lincoln, who was thought to have clinical depression. There are also other people like the mathematician John Nash, who was thought to have or who had schizophrenia. Having a mental condition does not make a person violent or dangerous. The truth is, living with a mental health condition makes you more likely to be a victim of violence. That's absolutely true. There's been studies that's been done that there's been estimates of 1 in 4 individuals with mental illness have been victims of violence themselves. And it kind of makes sense, isn't it? Because if as someone who struggles with mental health, if you've been through a lot of traumatic experiences in your life, such as violence, that may perhaps lead to your mental health being affected as well. So this next part is really just to highlight the difficulty in defining mental illness. And I think that's also one of the reasons why people don't really understand what it is or what it encapsulates. So I'm going to read out the American Psychological Association's definition of depression and anxiety. Depression is a common but serious medical illness which affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Anxiety is an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increased blood pressure. So oftentimes these definitions really just focus on the symptoms, but they don't really tell us what the experience is. And so it's easy for us to, when we look at that, to think that, oh, depression means that it's just typical sadness, for example, or that anxiety is just what you might feel for a brief moment because of a presentation, for example. So it's much more than that. And to help everyone to understand mental illness a bit more, let's hear the stories of individuals who struggle with their mental health. So this is Nurul's story. She'll be talking quite a bit about her struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. It's quite a heavy video, so if you do need to step out for a bit, that's absolutely fine. But I thought it would be good for us to just listen in on her story and how she describes her depression.
Feeling suicidal, it's not a sign of weakness, okay? Because you are just being overwhelmed with so many problems and you just can't see a way out of your problem. And sometimes the pain can be very intense and you just want the pain to stop, and the only way to stop the pain is by ending your life. So don't keep these feelings to yourself, because it's always important to seek help. And don't let fear, shame, or embarrassment prevent you from seeking help, because just talking about how you got to this point in your life can release a lot of the pressure that's building up inside of you. And in a way, it can help you to find ways to actually cope with this problem.
Macam moments biasanya dia malam sebenarnya. Dia malam ataupun dia masa pagi bangun tidur. Dia actually bila kita rasa sedih yang teramat, ataupun kita rasa kita sedih tak tahu sebab apa, ataupun kita rasa kita tak ada rasa untuk hidup. Kadang-kadang macam saya cakap tadi, kita tak tahu kenapa kita sedih. Tiba-tiba kita malam tak boleh tidur. Macam kita macam fikir benda yang jadi hari tu, kadang-kadang benda kecil macam kita tercakap kasar kat kawan kita pagi tu ke, tu malam tu kita overthinking benda tu, lama-lama kita rasa macam tak patutnya kot macam tu. So lama-lama benda tu akan macam kita fikir pasal benda lain pula. Betul kita macam fikir selama ni kita pernah buat kat kawan kita macam ni ataupun kat family kita. So the overthinking that go on by times buat kita rasa macam overwhelmed dengan benda tu. That's why kita rasa macam sepatutnya aku stop buat benda ni, aku tak nak buat benda ni dah. Rasa macam sampai satu tahap kita rasa macam penat, macam alah penat lah nak fikir pasal benda ni, penat lah. Kalau macam kalau tak ada, bukan semua masalah akan selesai macam tu lah. Lepas tu I start thinking about suicide. But I tak adalah terus pergi ambil dia pisau cukur yang kecil, dia jilat one tu. I tak adalah terus ambil terus. I rasa I pegang, I like playing with the thing, I playing with the pisau. So I pegang and then I rasa sikit sakit ke kalau kena. So I check test lah, I rasa test but I didn't like one time I keluar one time, I rasa macam I test dekat I punya jari sikit, I test kat I punya tangan sikit, I test kat I punya kaki sikit, and the feeling of the pain yang I rasa macam one time I rasa puas. sakit. Saya macam lega sikit. I think the pain that kena pisau tu is better than the pain in my heart.
Satu benda yang kita perlu tahu bila kita berhadapan dengan orang yang ada idea untuk bunuh diri ialah kita boleh bertanya dan berbincang kepada mereka tentang idea mereka tersebut. Kita boleh bertanya apa yang menyebabkan dia rasa begitu, apa metod ataupun kaedah-kaedah yang dia dah rancang, dia dah ada perancangan ke belum. Walaupun soalan-soalan tu mungkin bagi kita macam sensitif, tapi sebenarnya kajian menunjukkan bahawa bertanya dan berbincang tentang idea nak bunuh diri bukan satu tindakan provokasi untuk orang tersebut lebih membunuh diri. Jadi sebenarnya berbincang dan bertanya lebih membuka ruang untuk dia berkongsi dan supaya kita pun lebih tahu tentang apa idea dan perancangan mereka supaya kita...
Okay, so let's stop right there. Yeah, so again, it was quite a heavy video where Nurul really explains in detail about her feelings about suicide and self-harm, as well as her overwhelming thoughts. So as you can see from the definitions before, it didn't really capture how painful the experience is and how all-consuming it can be as well for the individual. And I think one of the things that that Nurul said that really stuck with me was that, the pain of the blade is preferable than the pain in my heart. All right. So what about other people who have described their depression? All of these quotes can be found in Mind Charity UK. So this is just a mental health organization that advocates for mental health and provides information about it. So sometimes it feels like a black hole, but sometimes it feels like I need to cry and scream and kick and shout. Sometimes I go quiet and lock myself in my room. And sometimes I have to be doing something at all times of the day to distract myself. I felt as if I had lost myself and wouldn't ever be the same again. So as you can tell, experiences of depression could be different from people to people. With Nurul, she felt this overwhelming pain. With this individual, it was like a black hole or feeling a sense of loss as well. So this is another video where a number of people who get together and discuss about their anxiety. Just to say that the Mind Mental Health Charity actually has a series of really good videos on talking about mental health. So this is episode 2 about anxiety, but they have lots of topics on depression, PTSD. So I do implore you to check out their channel and check out this series as well. Let's play the video.
The first time that I experienced anxiety was probably 12 years ago. I get the shakes. I'd be sitting at work and I'd physically, the hands would be shaking, so I'd sit on my hand.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was thinking. I didn't know what I was feeling, and I didn't know. I was more like, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling like this?
When I feel at my worst, I just shut myself in and I don't want to talk to anyone. I can't even answer the phone or anything.
So I felt like I was going to die every day. The symptoms, my heart palpitations, just get stomach pains, pins and needles down the headaches. For me, it was just about getting through the day.
What I did a lot of the time before I found coping mechanisms, which was to seek constant reassurance from other people.
All the time. I think that's one of the main things about anxiety.
Did you find it made you better?
Yes, it did.
All the time?
Not all the time.
Temporarily?
It did for about 10 seconds,
Right.
and I'll have something else wrong there, and then I've got to get reassurance
Exactly.
again.
I spent most of my life seeking reassurance from others. Like you say, if health anxiety problems,
anyone.
Yes. Yeah, and you get kind of temporary relief. It's like a bit of a drug fix. It goes away for a bit and then it comes back. So you have to find longer term coping mechanisms.
It's like a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Last year, one of the things that I identified with perfection was a minimum standard for me. It wasn't a goal, and that's what it should be. It should be a goal. Perfection, yeah, aim high. But don't set it as the minimum, because that really is what can trigger an awful lot of anxiety.
What I was going to do as well is say if you've got heart palpitations or like I used to get lumps in the throat, do not look up the symptoms on the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Do not do that, because that is a no-go. That'll come up big
You're absolutely right. I had CBT. I had severe depression.
Okay. So as you can see from this video, each and every one of them had similar but slightly different experiences as well. One person talks about perfectionism. Another talks about the needing to seek reassurance from others. So it's really, anxiety is really quite a complex mental health condition as well. What really, I guess, struck me about this video is that these individuals are getting together to talk about anxiety, and perhaps some of them have gone through social anxiety as well, or the anxiety of being around other people, and to openly and vulnerably talk about their mental illness is, you know, in essence, extremely brave. And they talk, and you know, and it shows how resilient they are as well. And you know, going back to my previous topic about, you know, mental illness and how people like to exclude them from certain spaces like employment, you know, one thing that individuals with mental illness will have to do each and every day is that they overcome, or they cope with their mental illness. They battle with it, but you know, and that's why they are so resilient. They are able to go to work, and they are still battling their inner demons as well. So rather than excluding them, we should like support them as well through their battles with their mental illness. I paused the video because I think in the next 2 minutes, they talked quite a bit about a treatment for anxiety. And I think one of them is cognitive behavior therapy, which I won't go into detail in this webinar. But basically, cognitive behavior therapy is, I guess, a gold standard treatment for anxiety and depression. And it's been shown from studies that it does really help with managing that anxiety and managing depression as well. Okay. Oops, sorry. All right. Okay, so let's go over some more quotes of individuals who've gone through anxiety and how they describe their experience. You know that feeling when you're rocking on the back legs of your chair, and suddenly for just a split second you think you're about to fall? That feeling in your chest. Imagine that split second feeling being frozen in time and lodged in your chest for minutes, hours, days. And imagine with it that sense of impending doom and dread sticking around too. But sometimes you don't even know why. For me, anxiety feels as if everyone in the world is waiting for me to trip up so that they can laugh at me. It makes me feel nervous and unsure whether the next step I take is the best way forward. So I know I said that the main focus of this webinar will be on talking about depression and anxiety, but I do think it's worth just talking very, very briefly on a mental illness which I think a lot of people significantly stigmatize towards or against, and that's psychosis. So psychosis is essentially this condition where there's a difficulty in deciphering what is reality and what isn't reality. You may know the terms like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, and all of those go under the umbrella term of psychosis. So essentially, individuals with psychosis go through hallucinations, whether it's hearing or seeing things that others don't, or delusions, like having thoughts that might not reflect reality. And because of that, they may do things or behave in certain ways that other people may not understand. And that's why it's so easy to stigmatize this group of individuals. So I would like to show a video that really is an experiential one that allows us to experience what it's like to hear voices. As we watch this video, I'd like everyone to focus on the screen and try to read the letters on the screen as opposed to hearing what the voices are saying. So it's a very short video, but I think it's a very powerful one.
You're just stupid. You're so, everybody knows that. So clever. How are you feeling today? No, you think you're so clever, don't you? Well, you're not. You know that, right? You're stupid. You're stupid. You're just plain thick. Well, you go around thinking you know it all. Bother even trying. You're just plain thick. You're worthless. Bother even trying. You're bound to fail. Just admit, you're a loser. No good. Worthless. You go on pretending you can do this, that you're clever than you are, but we know the truth, don't we?
You smell that? I smell fire. I smell something burning, but like plastic or tar or something, right? What's that? I've got nothing for you now. You know me. No, I don't know me. Yes. You should be avoiding that looks like a big child. He's staring at you. They know. Look over the counter. They know what you're thinking. Do I know him?
You look good. You look well.
Stop
You know what?
looking at me.
I'm just proud of you the way you're coping. No, it's terrific. It's terrific. Do you know what? You should be proud of what you've achieved.
Okay. So I think one of the things that about this video that's so powerful is that, you know, it, at least for I wouldn't say that everyone with psychosis goes through similar experiences such as this, but a number or a large chunk of them do. Large number of individuals, I mean. And you know, as all the voices were talking, you know, when I said like try to read at the screen, it's really difficult to, isn't it? Because as the voices are talking, it's like all consuming almost. And imagine like some individuals with psychosis go through this every single day. And again, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that everyone goes through to the same extent as this. As you know, psychosis is such a broad mental illness, but you know, this, I think what's powerful about this is that you begin to understand why perhaps individuals with psychosis behave in a way that we might not, or think in a way that we might not understand. I'm not going to show this video. So Dolly's experience of psychosis. She's a person who have had psychosis and talks really extensively about her experience. So again, like you know, when you have the slides, or you could take down the link, do have a look and listen into how she describes her experiences of psychosis. Okay. And this is, I'm not going to go through this video as well, but another mental illness that's talked a lot about is bipolar disorder. And Martin is a person who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and talks quite sensibly about it, about his experiences of it. Okay. So why does mental illness occur? How does it happen? And I think I alluded to it beforehand about the biopsychosocial approach. So really, how mental illness occurs is that it's a complex interaction between biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors. So, for example, with biological factors, it could be genetics, so having family members who have mental health struggles, or neurochemical imbalances in the brain. With psychological factors, it could be having a history of extensive abuse or trauma, or having like current significant stressful life experiences. Or it could be a learned coping or social skills. So perhaps someone who've learned in their life to use alcohol as a means of coping. In terms of social factors, it could be socioeconomic factors, things like staying in a socially deprived area, having financial difficulties or work difficulties, and of course, being socially isolated from families and loved ones. So all of these interact, and the theory goes is that the more factors you have, the higher the chance of you to have or to struggle with your mental health. So based on the biopsychosocial factors, really, there's no such thing as me as normal and them as abnormal. In essence, our mental health exists on a continuum. At the far end, very few of us can say that we are, our mental health is completely well, and that we don't feel any forms of sadness or anxiety or any emotions that people might attribute to as negative. And also on the far end of the spectrum as well, mental health difficulties. Few people have really severe, significant mental health difficulties. So really, we are all somewhere in the middle, where we have fluctuations of mood depending on our experiences. And the biopsychosocial factors moves you up and down the mental health continuum. So what that means is that, so say if you are someone who has a parent who has clinical depression, for example, you may be predisposed to a mental illness. So maybe you're somewhere around here, and perhaps you have experiences that are quite stressful that has occurred recently, such as a relationship breakup. So your mental health could be somewhere in the mild spectrum or the moderate. And once it feels like your experiences have, you felt better after the experiences and things in your life become a little bit stable, you might go back to mild and normal. So that's what I mean by the biopsychosocial factors moves you up and down the mental health continuum. So what can we do to end stigma? The first is, of course, to become an advocate in your life. Speak about mental health. Acknowledge your own biases, because we all have our biases, including myself as a mental health professional. And encourage psychological support in not just others, but in yourself if you feel like you've struggled with your mental health. Ask questions in support organizations that advocates for mental health. There is Malaysia Mental Health Association, and also Souls Health has been known to really advocate for mental health. You can volunteer in these organizations, or attend events that they have to just learn a bit more about mental illness. I've also placed a few useful links for you to have in mind. Should you or your loved ones struggle with your mental health. So there is Befrienders, which is the suicide helpline, which is open 24 hours. Talian Kasih, which offers counseling, and this is the number here. Malaysian Mental Health Association, which offers counseling services as well. I've also linked in web links from AIA and Reach In Online, which details places where you can seek for mental health treatment, whether it's public or private. Be an active listener. Be non-judgmental and empathetic. Listen with empathy, show concern, and ask questions. So it's okay to ask questions. Ignorance is not necessarily a problem in itself. It's only a problem when you choose to continue with the ignorance. So ask questions. It's okay to. Avoid telling someone to get over it, or that other people are hurting too. And avoid sensitive words like crazy or psycho. See the person and not the label. And I think this is very important. Say a person with depression and not a depressed person. Why is that? Because when we put the label before the person, we are really showing that the label matters more than the person. But actually, a person is much more than their mental illness. There's so much more to a person beyond having clinical depression or OCD or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. So change the way you talk about individuals with mental illness by saying a person with such and such. This is how you can be an active listener. There's 5 tips here. Pay attention to what they're saying. Drop your phone. Give your verbal and physical presence. Withhold judgment. So, for example, if they say something that may seem similar to your experience, and to you it might seem like they're not coping as well as you have, for example, try not to judge them, and remember to understand that that there might be more things that they're struggling with beyond what you see. Reflect. I wonder if, or it sounds like this. Clarify. Did you mean this when you say this? And summarize. So it sounds like such and such and such. And of course, I think I talk about this quite a bit. Do not discriminate or exclude someone based on their mental health. If you or anyone you know have been discriminated, or you feel like there have, that others have experienced that discrimination, whether it's in employment, do check out this link by Relate, which tells you your mental health rights in Malaysia. And hopefully that will be informative as well. Okay, so before we end, I'm going to revisit the same 4 questions that we had in the beginning. Would you be comfortable having a conversation with someone who has a mental illness, such as depression or anxiety? Would you care for a family member who has mental illness? Would you be friends with someone who has a mental illness? Would you want to be romantically involved with someone who has a mental illness? Differently than before, I want you to focus on your yes answers instead of the no's. So if you say yes to being comfortable to have a conversation or caring for a family member, really ask yourself why. Why would you? All right, thank you. Any questions? Great, guys. So I think it's ended. Oh, yes, Grace is here.
Hi, guys. Please feel free to comment in the comments. So actually, I have one question for Dr. Aisya. We know that now people easily get any information online, right, about the symptoms of mental illness. So easily for people to label someone with just one symptoms or two symptoms. Like for example, my friends is easily have negative thoughts, so they'll easily label them as depressed people, a person who undergo depression. Is this categorized as stigmatized?
Not necessarily, but it could be a reflection of that lack of knowledge again, as I mentioned before. So it could be that based on something that someone read or conversations, it might be that, oh, this looks like symptoms of depression. Maybe you have depression. And I think in those cases, as with the active listening part, it's good to listen in to what the person is saying rather than giving suggestions like, oh, you have depression, or oh, you have anxiety. But if they really sound like they're struggling with their mental health, and if it sounds really significant, of course, talk to them, and of course, encourage them to seek psychological help. And through psychological help, a professional will diagnose and will explain what the treatment options are.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aisya. Others, do you have any questions for Dr. Aisya? Is there any questions or something that you are unknown or you are not clear with? Yeah, feel free to comment it, and Dr. Aisya will help you to clarify for you. Is there any questions? If no, then once again, we thank you, Dr. Aisya, for the powerful sharing. Before we end the sessions, actually, I would like to have, hold on, give me a moment. I would like to use the opportunity to share with you the program that we offer at SAGI, which is a psychological program. This is a American degree program, and what I would like to highlight for this program is that this is the accredited degree program, and students who are students can able to entry this program right after SPM. So for those who are interested with this program, you feel free to contact us for more details. Secondly, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, for those who want to have their e-certificate, now you can able to go to this link, and my colleagues will email you within 14 days. Okay, so hold on, give me a moment. I think there's someone who has questions for Dr. Aisya. Someone who is depressed pretty much prefer loneliness. They tend to lock them in a room instead of trying to talk to someone. Is there any suggestion that Dr. Aisya can give?
So I think with depression, that's very much an experience a lot of people with depression have, that feeling of wanting to isolate themselves, because as the depression gets worse and worse, they feel more lethargic, they feel like they want to lock themselves in their room, and they want to do the things that they used to find enjoyment with. I would say my suggestion is to, keep tabs on them, contact them, and be there as a friend, always sending messages saying that I'm here for you if you need, and do check up on them. And of course, don't be afraid to ask really hard questions. I think in the beginning as well, when Noura was talking about her story, the mental health professional was saying that it's okay to ask questions about suicide. So, it's okay if you want to ask them, have you thought about really hard and difficult thoughts, like about ending your life, for example? And if you find that their behavior is quite different than what they have been before, and they really are isolating themselves very much, so it suggests them to see a mental health professional so that they can help them to overcome what they're going through. Yeah.
Okay. There's a second question, is that should childcare workers with mental health issue allowed to work with children?
That's a very good question. I think it depends on what are the needs for the work. And again, I say this, right, and I stress very much that try not to discriminate or exclude someone from certain spaces. It's if the person feels comfortable enough to talk about their mental health condition, to really just explore what that means. And I'd say it's a really difficult question to answer, but I'd say, ask questions like, have they harmed some? Well, I think it's a bit tricky, isn't it? But I think yeah, just ask hard questions that, things like, have they worked with children in the past? How have they handled children before? And really just explore their values as well. So again, we don't want to discriminate someone who has mental illness. And to be honest, like, I think quite a number of people who have had struggled with their mental health and have gone on to work with children quite well. And in fact, like, when you really think about it, some mental health professionals, for example, may have struggles with their own mental health as well, and yet they work with a variety of people, children, teenager, adults, elderly. So it really just depends. Talk about them with their values, talk about their experiences, and usually you can gauge whether a person is someone that you can trust. And that goes with every every individual, even beyond someone who has a mental illness. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Aisya. So, if no more questions, so today's our webinars will be end here. Thank you everyone for participating and have a good weekend. So for those who want to get the e-certificate, the link will be posted downstairs, so you can access the link and get your certificate within 14 working days.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye. See you.
Bye.